St. Peter's Basilica. It's Rome. Bathed in this incredible golden morning light, the bells, the sound is just ringing out, something people hadn't heard quite like that in years.
Yeah, a real sense of occasion.
Totally. And there are pilgrims everywhere from all over the globe looking up at that balcony. It's this huge day of joy. Renewal, the inauguration of Pope Leo XIV, the first American pope.
A massive moment for the church.
And right there, walking beside him, is Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, the beloved Filipino cardinal. He's holding the Ring of the Fisherman, ancient symbol, huge weight.
Symbolizing that legacy, that trust, that unity everyone expected.
Exactly. And the world sees Tagle kneel, place that ring on Leo's finger, voice quivering, Latin words. The square just explodes. Applause, tears, everything. It goes viral. People are calling it a new Pentecost.
It looked like the perfect picture of unity. Seamless.
What if that image, that seemingly unbreakable bond, wasn't the whole story? What if it actually shifted pretty quickly into something much more tense, a profound decision?
Well, that's exactly what the sources we've looked at suggest. On the surface, yes, it was all harmony, handing over the keys, so to speak.
Right.
But underneath, well, it's a much more complicated story brewing.
Right.
So today, we're taking the stack of notes, the source material you've gathered, and we're going to unpack the surprising, sometimes painful reasons behind Cardinal Tagle's removal. We'll look at the intense Vatican dynamics, the global reactions, which were huge, and then this unexpected path to, well, maybe healing and reconciliation that came out of it all.
So our mission really is to get past the headlines, use these sources to understand what really happened in this pivotal and very human moment for the church.
Exactly. A shortcut to understanding.
Okay, let's start right there. On that inauguration day, a day of, as the sources put it, divine anticipation. What was the atmosphere like, according to what we've read?
Oh, it was magnificent is the word used.
Yeah.
The bells, the incense, roses, Swiss guards standing like statues, those vibrant uniforms against the old stone. All eyes on that balcony, waiting for Leo XIV.
And how was he described, the new pope?
Calm, weathered American face. That's the description. Carrying this sort of invisible weight, but also with a softness, like he was seeking service, not power. It really felt like renewal. Pilgrims from everywhere, Manila, Bavarian villages, all there united.
And right in the middle of it all, Cardinal Tagle, his presence with that ring of the fisherman. What did that signify to everyone watching?
Oh, his prominence was undeniable. He wasn't just, another cardinal. He was a global icon for many, walking beside Leo, holding that ancient ring. It wasn't just jewelry.
Yeah.
It was the symbol of Leo's authority, Vicar of Christ, the weight of Peter's responsibility. Millions were watching this very intimate transfer of legacy, trust, unity.
And the sources really highlight his unique appeal, right? He wasn't just admired, he was loved. What made him stand out so much?
Yeah, beloved Filipino cardinal is the phrase that keeps coming up. He embodied this Catholic tenderness, gentle voice, compassionate eyes. He seemed to embrace everyone. He was hope for young people in Asia, a bridge for reformers, even surprisingly respected by traditionalists. Well, the sources add, until recently.
Ooh, that qualifier again. Until recently, very telling.
It is. He just had this charisma, this approachability alongside a deep spirituality.
But in that moment with the ring, it was just reverence, pure and simple, the symbolic weight of it.
Absolutely. The sources say the square went silent, as if the earth itself paused. He knelt, spoke the ancient Latin, voice quivering apparently, received the ring, sign of the mission, shepherd to the flock, servant of unity.
Wow.
And when he placed it on Leo's finger, cameras flashing, choirs erupting, applause like thunder, people weeping, kneeling. It was just this perfect visual, emotional moment of unity, hailed as a new Pentecost, this idea of spiritual renewal. It went viral everywhere.
A picture of brotherhood for the world. So from the outside, seamless, divine partnership. But almost immediately, you're saying things started shifting behind closed doors.
They did. That very evening, after all the ceremony, Pope Leo and his closest advisors met. And they were talking about glory. They were talking responsibility, healing wounds from scandal, politics, fatigue in the church.
Okay.
And Leo, who apparently listened more than he spoke, shared his conviction. This is not the time for crowns. It is the time for feet washing.
Feet washing, not crowns. And Tagle's response, was he on the same page?
Well, Tagle, described as ever gentle, apparently just smiled and replied, and yet the world is still watching our hands. There was laughter, the sources say, but also something else, something unspoken.
Oh.
And that's where the narrative starts to turn. Despite the images, the praise for unity inside the Vatican walls, not everyone was smiling.
So Even with that outward unity, murmurs started. What were people whispering about?
Exactly. Quietly, within the Vatican, some began to raise subtle flags, whispers that Tagle's popularity was becoming too strong, too political, that he had too many friends, too many followers, too much of a following. Some even started questioning if those warm public gestures were, maybe more for show than truly sincere, an almost imperceptible shift. But it was starting?
That's fascinating. And it really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? How virtues like popularity, compassion, connection, how they can suddenly look like liabilities in a different power structure.
That's a great way to put it. It's not just what you do, it's how your influence is perceived. Does it align or misalign with the established authority?
Right.
Which leads to this idea of the unseen burden of popularity.
Oh.
About 5 nights after the inauguration, Tagle apparently went to a small chapel in St. Peter's, knelt alone in the dark.
Okay.
And he prayed, not like a prince of the church, but like a son, whispering something like, "Lord, if my hands must be emptied so yours may be lifted up, then take all I have. But if I am to stay, let it be for your sheep, not for my name."
Wow. That's incredibly poignant. And that connects directly to what happened next, this critical misunderstanding.
It does. Because someone saw him there.
Right.
Maybe misunderstood his posture, maybe misheard him, and delivered a different version to ears already weary.
Oh, no.
And that, the sources suggest, was the quiet, unsuspecting start of it all. For Tagle, the man who put Peter's ring on another's hand, his own hands were about to be emptied in a way nobody saw coming.
So what looked like a bright dawn was already clouding over. And it sounds like Pope Leo himself might not have fully grasped the extent of this unease yet. Which brings us straight into part 2. The seeds of disquiet, when admiration starts to look like a complication.
Yes. The very next morning, Rome wakes up, and there's this odd calm. Pope Leo XIV gets up early, goes to his private chapel alone, no entourage.
Okay.
He kneels, whispers this phrase he apparently lived by. "Peace is not the absence of enemies, but the presence of Christ."
Yeah.
Firm voice, but tired, hadn't slept well. That ring of the fisherman, which should have been a joy, now felt like iron, the sheer weight of the papacy hitting him.
He felt the pressure immediately. And he laid out a vision for the cardinals pretty quickly, didn't he? What was the core of his message? How radical was it?
Oh, definitely. He addressed them in the Clementine Hall, that ornate room in the Apostolic Palace. His voice was steady, no pomp. He said, "My brothers, this church does not need another politician. It needs a healer, a shepherd."
Strong words.
Very. He talked about a radical mercy, refocusing on the poor, the abandoned, challenged the cardinals to remember their ordinations, not their titles. And then this kicker, the church must be poor again or she will become rich in pride.
Wow. That's a direct challenge to the power structures.
Absolutely, challenging the whole perception of the church as just an institution.
So how did it go down inside the Curia versus, say, globally? Was there a big difference?
Inside, it was mixed. The sources say many cardinals from Latin America were moved, nodding, but some European prelates, arms folded, watching carefully unreadable expressions. Tagle was apparently in the back, just listening respectfully. Outside the Vatican, though, much more positive. Cheers for an approachable pope, a new beginning. He even gave an interview talking about being a pope of bridges, not walls.
But even with that global applause, the whispers inside the Curia started right away. What were they saying?
Indeed. Despite the acclaim, some corners were uneasy. An old Monsignor apparently dismissed him as too American, said he talks like a governor, not a pope. Others were just cautious, waiting to see if he'd really follow through on reform or just talk the talk, questioning his commitment to tradition.
Okay, which leads us to this crucial moment, the confidential briefing where Tagle's name really becomes central to the problem. What was really going on in that meeting? What was the underlying tension?
Right. That evening, a confidential briefing. Small, wood-paneled room near the Secretary of State, a real power center. 10 seasoned cardinals, decades of Vatican politics under their belts.
High level.
Very. The official topic was structural continuity during transitional leadership. But really, it was about managing the power balance under Leo XIV. Could other figures draw authority away from him?
Ah, okay.
And a cardinal asks the key question. What happens when popularity overshadows tradition? What happens when a smiling face masks a strong will?
And boom, Tagle's name comes up repeatedly. How did they frame his popularity as this double-edged sword?
Repeatedly. They saw his popularity as potentially problematic, suggested his humility could become a mask. His closeness to the people could create confusion. And that unspoken question hanging there, Hadn't he nearly been elected himself?
Right. The what if.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Was he prepared to serve under another, or was he still quietly carrying the weight of disappointment? It shows how, in that hierarchy, individual charisma, even if well-intentioned, can be seen as a threat to the established order.
So admiration was definitely becoming a complication, not just a positive trait.
That nails it. And apparently, the Pope himself wasn't fully aware yet of how deep these concerns ran. He's at his window that night, looking at St. Peter's Square, praying for unity. Meanwhile, Tagle, down the hall, is reading psalms about brothers dwelling in unity.
Both wanting peace, but already drifting apart without realizing it.
Exactly. The seeds of tension were quietly being sown.
And they sprouted fast, leading to this direct accusation of a cult of personality around Tagle. What did that look like to these high-ranking cardinals?
Just 3 nights after the inauguration, another meeting, cardinals gathered, blunt talk. An older European cardinal apparently declared, "The honeymoon is over." Another added, sounding worried, "It's not the Pope's humility I question. It's the cult of personality forming around Cardinal Tagle."
Wow, cult of personality. So Tagle's name itself was gaining this uncomfortable power. What specifics did they point to?
Yes, uncomfortable power. They pointed to newspapers across Asia calling him the People's Pope in Waiting. On social media, his photos were shared more than Leo's. His old quotes on poverty, mercy, climate change were everywhere. The sources stress he wasn't coordinated, and yet it felt orchestrated. Someone tried to defend him, saying he doesn't ask for attention, it follows him.
Yeah, but that wasn't reassuring to them.
Not at all. The older cardinal apparently replied, chillingly, yes. And that's exactly what makes him dangerous. The fear was that his huge appeal could, intentionally or not, create this alternative spiritual center of gravity.
While this is brewing, Pope Leo is dealing with his own stuff. How did Tagle's popularity make things complicated for him as the new pope, especially thinking about unity?
He was definitely grappling with it. He got a personal letter from a priest in the Philippines saying Tagle's voice made the poor feel seen. The priest begged him, "Please, Holy Father, keep him close."
But Leo already knew about the popularity.
Oh yeah, he'd felt it himself. But now, in the silence of leadership, it felt complicated. He kept asking himself, was Tagle helping the mission of the church or unintentionally competing with it? That question, the sources say, lingered like incense, sweet and suffocating all at once. A constant dilemma.
And the whispers got more specific, right? Talk of a shadow network. What kind of conversations were being reported? What did they imply?
That's right. A confidential report landed on the Pope's desk. Overheard conversations in Vatican offices, dining halls, things like, "The one we needed was left behind. He still carries the people's trust. Tagle could lead the church in a different way."
Oof. That sounds ominous.
Leo felt like he was in a storm of invisible loyalties. Later that day, he took Cardinal Sarah, a respected conservative, for a walk in the gardens. Sarah's advice was blunt. "You are the Pope, but you are not yet the center. Make your authority unmistakable before someone else becomes the voice people follow."
Consolidate power, basically. Or risk losing it.
Exactly. This wasn't just about Tagle anymore. It was about Leo needing to assert his own authority in what felt like a fragmenting situation. And there was this warning from an advisor about building empires.
Right, the retired canon lawyer.
Yes. Leo didn't want to silence anyone, but knew silence itself could become complicity. This lawyer friend warned him about murmurs of a shadow network, suggesting Tagle's popularity was becoming structured alliances, influence, and the warning. Sometimes we build empires without knowing when all we meant to build was hope. A profound caution about unintended consequences.
Leo must have been in agony, these external pressures, his own internal conflict.
Totally. Couldn't sleep, apparently. Pacing, praying. "I do not want to rule by fear, but I cannot lead by sentiment either. Help me see." And across the courtyard, Tagle's also awake. He feels the shift, the coolness from other cardinals, the looks in the hallway. He doesn't know why. He just prays, "Use me, Lord, even if it means breaking me."
Wow.
The first real tremors of division were starting. What began as admiration was turning dangerous.
It had to come to a head, which it did. This brings us to part 3, the moment of decision. A chasm opens.
Right, the inevitable confrontation.
How did that critical meeting start, the summons?
It was a gray Thursday morning. Tagle receives this invitation. Thick cream paper, papal seal. Formal, but brief. "His Holiness requests your presence. Private consultation regarding transitional appointments. 9 a.m. Apostolic Palace, Room of Clement."
Just him and the Pope. No agenda.
Exactly. Tagle knew it was different. He got up early, walked over alone, praying Psalm 25. "Show me your ways, Lord. Teach me your paths." He sensed the gravity.
And the Clementine room itself, the sources describe a specific atmosphere, almost theatrical. Leo's posture, what did that signal?
Yeah, the room was hushed, solemn. Ancient tapestry is sort of soaking up the sound. Tagle walks in, and Leo isn't on the throne. He's standing by the window, hands behind his back, looking out at the gardens.
Not a formal audience, then.
No, definitely private, weighty. Tagle greets him, "Your Holiness." Leo turns, looking burdened. "Louis," he says, quiet but firm, "thank you for coming. This won't take long." Tagle recognized the tone, a man about to say something difficult, heavy, rehearsed.
And then the direct accusation. What exactly was the concern Leo voiced? How did he frame it?
Leo started slowly, talking about meeting cardinals, listening, understanding the dynamics. So he lays it out. "I've heard things. Concerns about influence, about the appearance of an alternative voice forming around your person." The words just hung there, like incense, thick and unavoidable. Real tension, not disloyalty, but this perceived challenge to authority.
How did Tagle respond to that, his immediate defense?
He looked down, then up, gazed steady, responded right away. "I've never desired anything more than to serve Holy Father, never outside of communion."
And Leo, did he accept that?
He nodded, acknowledged his sincerity, said, "I believe you, I do. But belief is not always enough when perception takes root." And that's the crux of it. Intent versus perception. Loyalty versus influence.
That's a huge distinction Leo makes there, perception trumping belief. And he elaborated on the core issue, this perceived competition.
He did. "Some believe," Leo continued, voice low but firm, "that you have continued to act as if the papal election never ended, that your voice still draws crowds larger than mine, that some bishops look to you, not me, for direction."
Wow. And Tagle's response?
Tagle couldn't blink, apparently. Said, "If my voice comforts the people, I give that comfort in your name," reiterating his selfless intent.
So Tagle saw it as just fulfilling his mission, bringing comfort, but Leo saw it differently. Why could that comfort be a problem?
Exactly. Leo countered, "I know, but comfort can become confusion, and confusion can become division. I need unity, Luis," his voice getting lower now, more intimate, full of the weight of the office. "I need a season of silence around every figure who might become a lightning rod. Not because I doubt your loyalty, but because I know your influence."
Ah, the strategic decision. Remove potential division, even if the source was well-intentioned.
That was it. His way of trying to ensure unity.
Which leads directly to the period of prayer and reflection. How was that presented? What was it really?
Tagle, understanding where this was going, asked, "What would you have me do?" Leo reaches into a folder, pulls out a single sheet of paper. "A period of prayer and reflection," he says. "Time away from Rome, in Ireland, a monastery outside Galway. No media, no statements, no contact with public ministry. Just time with God."
Wow. He hands him the paper.
Yes. Tagle takes it. He talks about spiritual renewal, discernment, silence. But the meaning's crystal clear. Removal from public life.
And Tagle's reaction? That quiet question. So this is exile. What did that reveal? How did Leo try to frame it?
He folded the paper neatly, expression unreadable, looked right at the Pope and asked softly, "So this is exile?" Leo immediately denied it, voice softer, almost, "No, this is protection." Tagle pushed back, "Of me." And Leo's reply, heavy with gravity, "Of the Church."
Liaisons after,
Yeah, seconds stretching into minutes. No argument, no plea. Just this ache of parting between two men who once stood united before the whole world. A deep personal sacrifice for what Leo saw as the institution's greater good.
The painful parting. How did it end? Was there an immediate announcement?
Finally, Tagle stood, bowed deeply, said, "I will go." As he turned to leave, Leo rose, touched his shoulder gently. "This is not punishment. It is trust." But Tagle didn't turn back. Walked out, through the halls, past the saints, into the courtyard.
And people knew something had happened.
Oh yeah. No one knew the words, but every guard, every secretary who saw his face knew something had shifted. No public announcement, though. By nightfall, a quiet order. Cardinal Tagle's taking a sabbatical. Only a few close aides knew the real story.
But word gets around in the Vatican differently.
Exactly. Not through press releases, but through glances, gestures, absences. By morning, the sources say, the silence was louder than 1,000 proclamations. And in the still heart of the church, something sacred had been cracked, subtly but unmistakably. The beginning of seismic shifts.
That silence must have been deafening, especially for the wider world that loved Tagle, which takes us straight into part 4, echoes of absence as the church reacts.
Yeah, the fallout was immediate.
So Tagle's gone to Ireland. What's Pope Leo's state of mind? Alone in his study after making that huge call.
The sources paint a picture of real coldness in the palace corridors that night, as though the walls themselves were mourning. Leo's alone in his study. The only thing on his desk, Tagle's folded farewell letter. I go where I am sent, Holy Father, trusting that obedience is not absence.
Powerful words.
Leo hadn't wept during the meeting, but now, alone, he felt this profound ache. Leadership was lonelier than he expected, faster than he expected. The decision clearly weighed on him.
And then he gets an unexpected visitor.
A confidant.
A confidant.
Yes.
Cardinal Emeritus Benedetto Grassi, octogenarian, former advisor to John Paul II, shows up unannounced. This quiet, wise presence. Grassi just says, "I heard."
Wow. Direct.
Leo, surprised, asks if Grassi disagrees. Grassi doesn't answer directly. Instead, he shares wisdom from his experience across 5 pontificates. Each one began with a promise to heal, and each one faced a moment like yours when healing required a wound, framing it not as judgment, but as an inescapable reality of the job. That's a heavy statement. Did Leo feel he'd wounded the church?
He asked Grassi straight up, "Do you think I've wounded the church?" Grassi replied, "I think you've done something necessary, but necessary things are rarely painless." Then Grassi tells this story about John Paul II. Grassi had advised dismissing a popular young Polish bishop gaining influence, but JP II made him a cardinal instead, saying the church doesn't need fewer voices, it needs more harmony.
So Grassi was subtly suggesting Leo should have kept Tagle close. Integration, not separation.
It seems that way. Grassi leaned in, stressed, "You must be certain whether you're removing a threat or silencing a brother." Leo insisted he was protecting unity.
But Grassi pushed back.
He challenged him. "Then be prepared to defend your understanding of unity, because others may define it differently." Grassi's final advice was blunt. Don't let silence become exile, and don't mistake loyalty for threat. A deep caution about subjectivity and power. Leo struggled, admitted he needed quiet space to lead, knew the storm wasn't over.
Okay, so the immediate aftermath then moves to the formal announcement to the cardinals. What was that like? How did Leo justify it?
Yes, in the Room of Saints, this revered chamber, Leo formally announces Tagle's departure for a period of prayer and reflection. He stresses not punishment, not exile, but an act for unity and clarity. The room, the sources say, recoiled, a collective gasp almost, apprehension.
And the cardinals had questions, obviously. What were their main worries? How did Leo respond?
Many questions. Cardinal Ronaldo from Portugal asked if Tagle was consulted. Leo said yes, and Tagle received it with humility and obedience. Ronaldo pushed, asking about charges, any formal accusations.
And Leo's answer?
No charges. Leo denied any formal charges, saying only concerns, perceptions, the formation of influence that unintentionally or not had begun to fracture the mission of this papacy. Another cardinal stood up, mentioned Tagle's global love, especially among the poor. Leo's voice softened then, apparently. Hope is a gift. But when hope becomes loyalty to a personality instead of the gospel, it becomes dangerous.
That's the core justification again. Not personal failure, but the shadow, his popularity cast, threatening unity in Leo's view. And the painful truth about Tagle's future role.
Exactly. That came out when a younger Nigerian cardinal asked if Tagle would return. Leo's answer was heavy. "I hope so, but not to the role he held before." That was the signal. The door had been closed on his old job. Leo finished asking for prayers, saying the times demand not only faith but courage. The click of the door as he left, soft but definitive, a line drawn.
And if that was the internal reaction, the global wave of grief and anger must have been massive. How did the news hit, especially in the Philippines?
Oh, it was immense, like wildfire. Particularly in the Philippines. Tagle was a national hero, deeply loved. Suddenly he'd vanished from public view. People felt it like a death in the family.
Wow.
Crowds gathered spontaneously at Manila Cathedral, weeping, singing hymns, holding signs. "Tagle is our voice. We feel orphaned. Bring him back." Priests reported churches on weekdays, people praying through pain. Just this collective outpouring of sorrow and confusion.
And the Filipino bishop spoke out too, despite the usual caution about challenging Rome.
Some did. One senior bishop told journalists bluntly, "If the Vatican believes this decision brings peace, then they have not seen the tears of our faithful." Social media vigils started. Old homilies circulated. Anger grew. Protesters outside the Vatican embassy with signs, and this silence is violence. Tagle was a symbol of national pride. His removal felt like an insult to the Filipino soul, a deep collective wound.
How did Pope Leo react to these reports? Did he try to offer any reassurance?
He read every report, apparently without interruption, face showing sorrow. He drafted a private letter to the Archbishop of Manila, acknowledged the sadness, promised unity, but significantly omitted Tagle's name.
Strategic and personal, the sources called it.
Yes, trying to soothe without backtracking on his decision.
Meanwhile, the Vatican's public response must have been tricky. What did they put out? Did it help?
Tricky is an understatement. It was unsatisfying. The silence from the Vatican had become the loudest sound. Media storm erupted. Headlines like, "The Fall of the Filipino Saint," speculation about charisma versus control. Headlines like, "When mercy is silenced, the Pope of Peace begins with division."
So what did the Vatican actually say?
They issued this brief, clinical, 3-paragraph statement, mentioned Tagle's voluntary period of retreat and spiritual renewal, acknowledged the Pope's gratitude, asked for prayers.
That sounds underwhelming. Did it calm things down?
Not at all. It inflamed the conversation. Journalists picked apart every word, noting the detached tone. In Manila, people read it like an obituary, asking, "He taught us mercy was stronger than politics. What did we miss?"
And Leo?
Leo stood by his decision, weary, saying, "I prefer questions to applause." But internally, questions grew about his style. Did fear overrule discernment? A Jesuit professor wrote anonymously, but it circulated widely. When a shepherd silences a voice that brings comfort, the sheep begin to wonder whether the pasture has changed, suggesting a betrayal of trust.
And Tagle himself, in Ireland, receiving all this support and grief, did he react?
Letters poured in. Hundreds. "We miss your voice. Praying for you. Please come back." He read every word, replied to none. When a young monk asked if he regretted anything, Tagle looked out at the Irish stars and said quietly, "I regret nothing that was offered in love, even silence." Remarkable steadfastness.
Incredible. Finding purpose even in silence amidst that storm, which takes us perfectly into part 5, a letter that changed everything. Tagle's voice in silence.
Yes, this letter becomes pivotal.
So the world's reeling, the Vatican's fumbling the messaging, Tagle's in silent retreat. Then a letter arrives. How did this simple piece of paper reach Pope Leo? What was his immediate reaction?
A plain white envelope from Tagle's monastery, handwritten address, just Domus, Latin for home, standard Vatican return address, nothing specific, almost got lost in the official mail. But a junior secretary recognized the handwriting, put it on Leo's desk. He didn't open it right away, just stared at it for a long time, felt its weight, like carrying something sacred and unfinished. It held significance even before he read it.
And when he did open it, what did it say? What made it so profound, so unexpected?
It started without preamble. Holiness, the sources say, only words born in prayer. Tagle wrote, "Obedience is not the same as absence. The soul still speaks even when the tongue is still." He was clear, "I don't write to challenge, I write to bless. No request to return, no demand for restoration."
Wow.
And then this profound understanding of the people's reaction. They were not mourning me. They were mourning something older, something wounded, the part of the church that still longs to be heard, reframing the whole thing.
That is a powerful revelation, shifting the focus from him to a deeper wound in the church itself. What was his central prayer? His message about love and fear?
It really reframes it. He offered this insight. Exile can be holy if it is offered, not imposed. His central prayer was, "If I am to remain here, let it be because it serves the church's healing, not its strategy." In this plea, "I only ask that love not be replaced with fear." The final lines were just incredibly poignant, offering a guidepost. "I still pray for you by name, and I pray for the church, not that she would be strong, but that she would be good. In the end, goodness will be her only power." Signed simply, Luis Antonio.
That must have hit Leo hard. What happened next with the letter itself?
Oh, it did. Leo folded it with trembling hands. A huge shift happening inside him. Went straight to his private chapel, knelt, holding the letter. But what's amazing is what happened next, how it got out.
The viral impact. It wasn't official, right? How did it spread? What was the reaction?
No, totally unofficial. Someone, conscience, desperation, who knows, shared a copy with some cardinals. Once it was in their hands, boom, wildfire. Within 48 hours, it was everywhere. Blogs, Catholic news sites translated into dozens of languages, read aloud in seminaries, monasteries, soup kitchens, taped to church doors.
Wow.
It became, as the sources put it, a letter not just from Tagle, but from the wounded heart of the church herself. This raw, authentic voice cutting through the official silence.
The reaction must have been huge, given its moral authority.
Enormous. In Manila, thousands gathered to hear it read. Sorrow mixed with new hope. In Washington, a bishop who'd been silent broke that silence from the pulpit. I have never heard a more Christ-like response to injustice. Even some of Leo's own advisors started rethinking, one whispering, "He should have been pope." The letter just had this undeniable moral weight.
And this clearly deepened Leo's own reflection, his discernment. What hard questions did Tagle's words force him to ask himself?
Absolutely. He kept the letter in his breviary, his prayer book, read it over and over, felt the tide shifting, this longing in the church. He faced his solitude, asked himself tough questions. Had he acted too quickly, confused peace with control, silenced a prophet because that prophet reminded the church of wounds it preferred not to see.
Deep searching.
Intense prayer in his chapel. If I acted from fear, show me how to love more deeply. If I acted from pride, break it in me. His journal entry from then is revealing. The church is trembling not from scandal, but from memory, remembering what it means to be close to the poor. If Tagle's silence did this, then his exile may have been holier than any appointment.
And Tagle, through all this, stayed silent in Ireland. His personal prayer.
He did. Continued his prayers, totally detached from the global storm his letter caused, whispering, "Let them see you in this, not me." His silent obedience, ironically, became this incredibly powerful public voice for deep, painful, but ultimately transformative reflection in the church, paving the way for change.
Which sets the stage perfectly for part 6, humility and healing the Pope's path to atonement.
Exactly. The turning point.
So Tagle's letter is out there, sparking this new conversation. Pope Leo isn't just reflecting alone, though. He gets counsel from some elders. Who were they? What was their message?
Yes, 3 elderly cardinals. Bianchetti from Milan, Toussaint from Lyon, Pereira from Sao Paulo. They arrive unannounced, dressed simply, seeking truth without strategy, as the sources put it. Not critics, but respected elders, witnesses to decades of papal history.
Okay.
They reminded Leo of Paul VI, John Paul II. That thin line between discipline and fear. How when a shepherd begins to fear his own flock, he forgets who gave them to him.
They acknowledged his good intentions, but challenged the action directly. What was their advice?
Exactly. They told him the church is not a government and the papacy is not a fortress. The people do not need protection from hope. Their advice was clear. Not undo, but acknowledge. Speak not with authority, but with humility. Tell the church what you were learning, not what you've planned.
And Leo's response?
He admitted, "I thought I was protecting unity." Pereira's reply was profound. But unity without listening is not communion, it's control. They left him with a quote from Pope Gregory the Great. The true pastor must not fear the loss of his own dignity when he seeks to protect the dignity of the least among his flock.
Powerful counsel, clearly preparing him for what came next. His public repentance. St. Peter's Basilica, that Sunday. What was the atmosphere? What did he actually say?
It was monumental. Sunday Mass. Pope Leo preaching, first public sermon since Tagle left. The air was quiet, expectant, palpable tension. Leo goes to the pulpit, speaks from the heart. There are moments when silence says more than speech.
He went right into it.
Directly, confessed. For the past weeks, many of you have wondered where the voice of the church has gone. I have offered you little in return, but today, I come before you not with declarations, but with repentance.
Wow, repentance. And he admitted fear was the reason, explicitly.
Yes, stark honesty. I sent a brother away, not because he disobeyed, but because I was afraid that his voice might make mine feel small. He talked about a shepherd's role. A true shepherd lifts the bell higher so all may follow at home, admitting his own failure. He acknowledged the wound caused, saying, I do not undo what has been done, but I acknowledge the wound it caused, and I ask humbly that you pray for me.
And he asked for prayers for Tagle, too, but importantly, not as someone removed.
Correct. Ask for prayers for Tagle, not as a removed voice, but as a brother whose absence has reminded us all of what is missing when mercy is made quiet. And then, the gesture. Profound, unexpected. Leo steps down from the pulpit, walks slowly, and kneels before the whole congregation.
Kneels, a pope, publicly.
Unprecedented in that context.
The impact must have been incredible. In the basilica, globally, what was the reaction?
Shockwaves. The basilica erupted in weeping. Deep emotion echoed worldwide. The sources capture it beautifully. A shepherd had returned to his sheep with his knees on the ground, an image of vulnerability, humility that just resonated deeply. Tagle, watching on a grainy screen in Ireland, whispered, Thank you, Lord. Let him be the voice now.
This homily, this kneeling, it really signaled a new kind of papacy, didn't it? Redefining power. How did different groups react to this new style?
Absolutely. It sent shockwaves. For some, profound courage, spiritual renewal. For others, deeply unsettling, a weakening of papal authority. One cardinal worried Leo had opened the door to interpretation. People no longer ask what the church teaches, they ask what the Pope regrets.
But others saw it differently.
Yes. This circle of Emmaus formed younger bishops, theologians. They saw it as the beginning of a new kind of papacy, not one that loses power, but one that redefines it through vulnerability, responsiveness. When a proposal for a council of discretion, a committee to manage sensitive issues, landed on Leo's desk, he just put it aside, whispered, Let the Spirit breathe. He realized, walking the gardens, the church had never been meant to speak with just one voice. but with many voices.
A huge shift in his understanding of leadership.
Massive. He started seeking counsel more widely. Nuns, theologians, a bishop from the Amazon traditionally marginalized voices.
Yeah.
One nun told him gently, "Holiness, what you did at that pulpit was not just an apology. It was a beginning of a church that can kneel again before her people to wash their feet." Signaled a fundamental change.
And then this final pivotal visit from Cardinal Sarah, surprising given his earlier advice. What happened in that conversation?
Yes. Sarah, the conservative who'd urged Leo to become the center, arrives unannounced. Private audience. They meet in the same Clementine room where Leo met Tagle. Sarah's honesty was striking. "Your apology has created confusion. Your humility may be misread as surrender, but I believe your public act of repentance was holy, and I believe it may cost you dearly."
Acknowledged the political risk, but affirmed the spiritual truth. What was Sarah's challenge, his plea regarding Tagle?
Precisely. Sarah told him, "Some will not forgive your honesty.
What?
Others saw Christ in you that day." Leo asked directly, "Do you think Tagle sought power?" Sarah's thoughtful reply, "I think he sought souls, and in seeking them, the world gave him power he never asked for." Sarah's challenge, "Then teach the people that love, when guided by humility, does not compete, it completes." And then the plea, "And if I failed him, then bring him home."
Bring him home. And Leo's response, what did he give Sarah?
Leo gave Sarah Tagle's letter to take to him, the very letter that sparked everything. He said, "His silence was louder than my authority, and it has taught me how to listen again." They embraced, longer, slower than usual. Reconciliation, mutual respect. Sarah's final words were a challenge. "Restoration is not a command, it is a door. You can unlock it, but only he can choose to walk through," setting the stage for Tagle's potential return.
So the path was cleared, but the choice was Tagle's, which brings us to our final part, part 7, the return, reconciliation, and renewal.
Yes, the concluding chapter.
2 months after Leo's homily, things are quieter, a different kind of quiet.
Yes, a stillness settled. Not tension, but a holy pause. Like after a storm, the air feels fresher. The humility Pope Leo showed was starting to bear fruit.
And then the whisper of hope. The message from Tagle, what did it say?
Right. Leo's reading the morning bulletin. Secretary announces, "A letter has arrived from Galway." Leo recognizes the handwriting instantly. It's brief, just a few lines, but huge. "I have prayed through your words, and I believe grace has done its work. If you still have need of a brother who walks without ambition, I am here not to lead, but to serve in Christ."
Wow. Humble, direct.
Leo pressed the letter to his chest, closed his eyes. Huge relief. That afternoon, he just picked up a pen, started writing back by hand.
The public announcement must have been incredible. How did Leo frame Tagle's return?
It was. 2 weeks later, Sunday Angelus. Pope at the window overlooking St. Peter's Square. He looks radiant, shares something personal, speaks of the man who placed the ring on his finger, the one he sent away. Long silence. Crowd holds its breath. Then Leo continues, voice clear. "Today, I have asked him to return not to power, not to title, but to friendship."
Friendship, the square must have erupted.
Thunderous applause, gratitude sweeping the square.
And Tagle's new role, how was it defined? What was the mission?
Pope announced Tagle would return as envoy of reconciliation, a mission not of politics, but of presence. He would go where there is division. You will walk with those who feel forgotten. Remind us all that silence offered in love becomes a voice the church cannot ignore. It leveraged Tagle's strengths, compassion, connection focusing on healing from the ground up, not hierarchical power. Tagle in Ireland packs his small bag, Bible, rosary, Pope's handwritten note. He smiles.
And the reunion, the embrace of forgiveness between these two men.
When Tagle arrived at the Vatican gates, he paused, noted something had changed in him, in the church. A lightness. Leo met him privately. No words needed initially, no choreography. Just two men, older, wiser, humbler. Leo spoke first. "I was wrong." Tagle gently shook his head, eyes understanding. "You are human." Leo smiled, deep relief. "Then let us be human together." They played together in the Pope's private chapel, just two voices reciting psalms. Faith, shared vulnerability. The next morning, Tagle walked the halls, not as a prince returning, but as a servant, a quiet, healing presence. Visited St. John XXIII's chapel, whispered, "Help us build again."
So not just a return, but a new beginning, a deeper church bruised, but more beautiful. What was the lasting impact?
Precisely. News spread. Bells rang in the Philippines. Bishops in Latin America cited it as proof of humility. Seminarians wrote essays, "The Church That Kneels." Studying it as a paradigm shift. The sources are clear, the scar remained, the pain was real, but it no longer bled. It became a mark of healing. A reminder of a tough but redemptive journey. The church didn't go back to what it was. It became something deeper, something more bruised perhaps, but also more beautiful. a profound example of reconciliation born from humility, showing true authority isn't just power, but vulnerability, the courage to admit error.
What an incredible story. This deep dive into why Cardinal Tagle was removed.
Hmm.
It really shows it wasn't simple. It was this complex mix of power dynamics, perception, fear, and these deeply held beliefs about unity and leadership.
It really was. And what stands out, I think, is how Tagle's quiet obedience, that incredibly powerful letter, combined with Pope Leo's deep introspection and his brave public humility, how that led down this unexpected path of healing and really redefinition for the Church. It's a powerful story about leadership, vulnerability, forgiveness that goes beyond just the religious context.
It really does. And for you listening today, whether you're in leadership or just navigating daily life, this story kind of asks us, doesn't it? What happens when we choose to kneel before our own limitations, when we admit we're wrong? How might that vulnerability actually unlock a deeper, more authentic connection than any show of strength?
Yeah, think about the quiet power of silence sometimes, the transformative courage it takes to admit a mistake, and how maybe sometimes the greatest acts of leadership are the ones that involve humbling oneself. What could that look like in your own world, your own sphere of influence?
Definitely something to reflect on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you leave not just informed, but maybe a little provoked to consider these profound questions.